Welcome to the Backyard Farm.
Peppers need shade just like people do. This is actually an example of sunburn on a pepper. So peppers like to have these big, wide shade leaves, and that actually protects them from the sun. As much as they like heat, direct sunlight for a long period of time can actually cause the plant to sunburn on itself. And if it reflects in the right way, you actually see this blistering outwards. So again, this is an example of pepper sunburn. So again, if we had more shade leaves protecting here, if this plant was leaned over a little bit more, maybe it would have protected itself. But because it's stuck itself out at the bottom here, and there really are no direct shade leaves on this plant, it's exposed to a lot of sun during the day. So this means it can actually physically sunburn itself. And there's unfortunately no sunscreen for peppers. That kind of stinks. But this actually, the best way to help this is to trellis our plants properly, stand them up so that they can shade themselves naturally and focus on the growth that they need to in order to protect themselves from that direct sunlight. A great variety of peppers here in this garden, a great variety of things that we can do with them. We can pickle some, we can dehydrate some and make them into maybe some hot chili powder that we can use later in some recipes. A little bit of that goes a super long way. We can roast them, we can dehydrate them and turn them into spices. There's all kinds of things we can do here. Things are going great right over here. This plant's doing really healthy. It was able to come in at a decent time, and we're able to still get good healthy growth over here, get a little bit of shade in the right time of day, and these plants took off really well. Flowers are still blooming. They're still able to produce beautiful fruit late on in the season and kind of continue growing. Now what can also happen with this is we're going to be in the middle of the season and we're going to see something right next to it that was planted at the same time that didn't quite do so well. So as you can see, this plant over here, a lot of that foliage has died back. There's just a few fruiting sites over here. A few of these plants over here actually didn't even make it at all. They kind of just hung out right here and didn't quite make it. Didn't produce very many fruit. They tried to, but they just couldn't quite hang on. If we do some lab testing, that might be a good way for us to find out whether or not we had a viral load, or whether this was just some form of environmental condition that was causing us a problem. Diagnosing a problem is a big part of figuring out how to maximize that space that you do have. If you have any comments about this, let us know down below what you think we did wrong. Good example here as well, where we saw health in the plant and where we saw less health in the plant. So a lot of these plants that didn't do so well, and maybe some people consider them a failure, we consider them a good lesson to learn from. So this is here, you can see at the bottom half of this plant here and kind of across here as we move along, these plants right here are very fruitful at the bottom, and then it sort of stops right here in the middle, and then these heads kind of die off in this middle section. Some of them have sprouted through it, some of them have a little bit of good greenery at the top here, but that stuff in the middle has sort of died off. That means that the plant is sucking away from that middle section in order to focus its growth on what it has left for fruit and what it has left for vegetation, to try and keep itself alive, to try and keep doing its job, which is to produce more and more for you. Another thing we can do to make sure that we protect ourselves from some of this late stage die-off is increase our calcium intake. What we could have done here as well is do a little bit of top dressing of maybe a soluble calcium product like Calnomag from Keto Life Supply. This gives us the capability of top dressing the product, watering it in normally, and allowing us to feed the plant that specific amount of calcium that we need to make sure that we're getting the fruit that we desire later on in flower. Here we are in the field of amazing corn. This stuff got so tall this year. I literally can't even come close to reaching the top of this thing. On top of it, the beans really took off this year. There's just beautiful bunches of beans along this entire thing, and the squash are actually still producing squash. You can see them right here. They're just little guys, but they're still flowering. They're still hanging out. I mean, this thing is an absolute monster of a bed. I have not seen corn this tall. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest in corn country, and this is some pretty darn tall corn here. Here we are at the kale bed. I am honestly super stoked about what happened with our kale this year. We're still producing big, luscious, beautiful green kale with really nice density, good thick nutrient value. You can tell by how vigorous it is, how sturdy and strong those leaves are, and just how bushy and colorful and beautiful these things are. We've had a little bit more of a wet season in Colorado. This means a little bit more bug pressure, and what really likes kale are aphids. So to keep the aphids off, we've actually just been rinsing with some clean water, and it's been able to keep the kale sort of off of the plants as much as possible. This is a superfood of superfoods. Kale, we try and get it into everything. It's super popular, and we can grow so much of it here. I mean, in this little bed, we're still at this time of the year, you can already see how many times we've harvested along here. Each one of those is a nice, giant, big, beautiful kale leaf that's been harvested. We've harvested through the season, and we're still producing. If the blueprints work, I think these plants would do really well where those tomatoes were failing on the other side. Reason being is that's going to give us two things. One, it's going to allow the berry bushes to get that direct sunlight that they need to get the maximum amount of fruit value that they're going to look for. Second thing is they're actually going to use that back fence there as a little bit of a self-support system in their own sort of trellis. If they grow back up against it and grow forward, moving against and away from that little fence area over there, not only is that going to provide coverage so that we don't get any light penetration for weeds, protecting us from needing to break our backs and mess our hands up pulling weeds out of the ground, but it's also again going to make sure that they grow with the structure that they need, so every year they can come back and get the exact kind of fruit that we're looking for.
Please like and subscribe. Thanks for the Dooley family.